Want to know something? Are you crocheting the best mittens you could possibly crochet? Are you staring at the window at a ladybug? Or are you annoying your family with random theories about fun fanfics that you found online? Well, you're probably in the right place. This is not enough questions. If you end up liking what you hear, tell a friend or leave a review.
Welcome back. Oh wow, I really did forget the intro. But I am Julian Johnson, hope you know the voice. My name today is Think Tank. The unperceived Tyler is still with us again. She still has howdy. And we have another redliner joining us. David, please introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm David Beckmeyer. I'm a former tech guy, and now I'm trying to be a science journalist, and I have a little podcast called Outrage Overload.
Thank you for being here.
I have the question. So Julian, please remind us all of the question.
Question is technology making us more or less human? This comes directly from David. David, you okay with this question? Or did you?
Yeah.
I know you said you took some notes. Did you want to set up the question?
No, it's fine. I when I went back and looked at the questions that we talked about, it was like, wow, these are hard questions, man.
But yes, what else are we here for? But no, questions all yours.
So yeah, I mean, these kinds of questions always, raise a lot of things about what do you even mean by some of these words, right? I mean, like, so what do we mean by being human, right? How do we even define that, right? So I'm not sure I completely know the answer to that, right? But I certainly know that humans have been, using technology, forever before Homo sapiens, right? We had millions of years ago, other Homo species were using tools and using technology of one form or another, and I guess, if I was to say, I think technology definitely, in my mind at least, moves us farther away from nature. And I'd say yes about that. Now whether that is also equivalent to making us less human or not, I don't know, because like I say, humans have used tools and used technology forever. So that would probably depend on how you think about, what it means to be human, or what that means. I sometimes think there's a relationship between sort of humanity and connectivity and connection, because it's so sort of part of, especially Homo sapiens, like we're groupie people. We sort of traded muscles for brain. So we can kind of only survive if we group up and work together. And so it seems like connectivity and connection are so important. And this is where, to me, tools, they can go either way, right? I mean, in some sense, I guess you'd have to ultimately say that it's probably neutral, because it depends on what we do with those tools, right? They don't automatically make it better. If you look at communications and technology, it may add some things, but it doesn't necessarily make us closer. So like, if you think about, something like the telegraph, that speeded up conversation or communication, but it also introduced, like, misinformation can spread faster. And, so sometimes technology, tends to divide us. Even if it does sort of give us more information, it can serve to divide us. So, I think it really depended on sort of what we do with this technology and our intentionality of it. And I think we have been naive in the past about, maybe that's just an optimism that humans have or something, that we see this new thing and we just assume, well, all our problems are solved now. Like, everyone will have the best information and democracy is going to be great, and then we find the reality that it doesn't always go that way.
Yeah, I feel like I fully agree. I feel like in a lot of ways, it's like funny though, because the way I feel like technology is almost marketed to us is like you're disconnected from where you are, but you're connected to this global process.
I'm just gonna say something that you touched on just a little bit is the human connection in nature, and how what Tyler was just saying about it being connected. I feel like with technology, it's like a weird thing. It's like making us a hive mind due to like how fast information can get to, but also you're no longer as connected to the people who's right next to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes I think we think of it as a substitute. Sometimes we think of it as a substitute, for those real connections. And it's often not a good substitute for those, right?
Yeah, that's true. My neighbors are the way our place is set up. People normally deliver stuff to the wrong place, and he had groceries outside, and he was like, "Are those your groceries?" I was like, "I don't think so." But yeah, I guess that's another thing.
There's
Like
technology right there.
I know it's like those funny mishaps connect people, but also it's almost a disconnect because I'm also trying to talk on a podcast. And it's would you have those same kind of things happen if you were actually if we were all in a room together and this was an actual physical space? And it's kind of but I feel like the flow would have been better.
I promise you, I would not be lagging so hard if we were in person.
Yeah,
that'd be a good trick if you could pull that off.
That'd be pretty funny. Oh my gosh. I would
continue, please.
dialogue. But yeah, I'm I don't know. I'm also of the mind what really makes me concerned a little more so than anything else, I guess, in technological advances is AI, because a lot of AI is actually supplementing even the very little connections we have through technology right now. People are using AI for mental health. And I find that to be a very interesting thing as well, because yeah, there are mental health things that can be replicated, but then a lot of people talk about how in therapy is it's more than just talking back and getting that validation for your emotions. There's also legitimate body work and other things that they teach you, like grounding work and breath work and things like that, and also just having that other person to connect with um on just a human to human level, I think is a little missing. And I guess to a certain degree, some people would probably say that maybe it makes therapy more approachable for them. Because some people get really nervous about telling all their thoughts and feelings to other people and things like that. And so it could help a certain set of people. But I do feel like we're also missing out on the opportunity for I guess professions to grow because of the human interactions as well. Because I think a lot of professions like therapists, you can't, in my mind, honestly, you can't become a better therapist or anything that's really physical that you and very based in human reactions is going to be harder to do without having those human reactions, because humans don't act like what is predictable all the time. Like we're multifaceted beings. And I guess it's also kind of scary to be how does technology capture a multifaceted being or predict all things? Everything about us is predictable. So it's also kind of an ego thing where it's you don't want to seem like the most predictable person in the world that technology can just replicate your whole personality. But on another scale, a lot of the things that we do when you study psychology, there are certain patterns, trends, things that show up that tell you kind of where these things might come from and stuff like that. So it's weird messing with the predictability and yet the unpredictability of human beings and the trying to capture that in technology. I just find that to be very odd.
Yeah, it's like we're trading or prioritizing sort of the cognitive side of things over all those other, more subtle, the sort of sublime human interactions, right? And we think we can just do it with the cognitive side, but we aren't super, we don't really appreciate how much benefit there is out of all that other part of the touching and the body language and the, like you say, grounding and the physical, being and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, we sort of think we're just these cognitive machines that can just do everything with our brains. And it's, you know, and that kind of gets back a little bit to that idea of, I guess, separating from nature and how critical is nature to humanity, right? I mean, and how closely connected. You obviously have some spiritual beliefs that really think that's really an important part of humanity, right?
Yeah, definitely. About nature, because I always think about like vitamin D deficiency is like a really big thing and also very much impacts your mindset, how you see and view things. And not only are you not getting vitamin D, you're also not getting human connections. So you're like, both is just, oh, no wonder like we're having so many mental health crises right now.
I do two thoughts that came to my mind about you saying emotions aren't linear, and how you mentioned the human connection. A friend explained it to me was people think emotions are irrational, and it's like, no, there's logic to it, but it just makes no sense to us of how we have emotions and how emotions come about. So to have technology try to replicate that would seems to me impossible, just due to the fact of how do you replicate something that has no reason, like that, just with no rhyme or reason. That is the very first thought that came to my mind.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of some people kind of argue that reason is kind of the thing that we don't actually have. It's all actually emotion, and it's just kind of various ways that these emotions get applied, and we have that kind of narrator, you know, in our brain that then applies after the fact, creates a narrative that gives it a rational reason, but really it was the emotions making the decisions all along, right? And you know, that's not necessarily how everything works, but it's how a lot of our decisions do end up working, right? The emotions play a big part in it, and then we have that rational part of our brain kind of invents the story after the fact to say we came to this super rational conclusion to arrive there, and then we defend it, right? We'll defend that rational decision, quote unquote, that we made, right?
That's interesting. I've never heard that before, I guess, until now. But it does make me think about a lot of things because I guess because I'm of two minds, I guess, with that, because I know a lot of people who are like, oh, they're very emotions first, and then they're like justified because they're just like, I'm always in my emotions, so my emotions are always valid. Where there's a lot of other people who are kind of the mind of like, I've rationally thought this out, and then I therefore had the emotion because I thought it was rational to have that emotion. And so it's funny to think that both basically stem from just emotion. And so it means that inherently in anything even remotely emotional, there's never really true logic to it. It's just kind of funny to me.
Okay. Can I add on to that? Something that I've also heard was yes, your feelings are valid and everything, but are your actions also just as valid? Because it's sure, if you feel hurt in any way, shape, or form, feel your feels, but because you feel hurt, you, I don't know, punch a hole in the wall. Like that's not acceptable. So there's I just wanted to throw that. I heard that the other day. I'm like, oh, that's a new something I wouldn't have thought about. Yes, your feelings are valid, but what about your actions that you take behind your feelings?
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
But yeah, also tying it back to it, I guess the main question, I guess I'm kind of thinking like if you're helping yourself get reasoning for your actions through like AI or something, there's no emotion there. So I guess it would be more of like is it hedging its bets? And they're like, most people who take this action feel okay after they do it. So this should be the most rational mindset, or like would they go by experts? Like, I guess that's kind of like another interesting thing too. Because technically the thing is that AI is supposed to be like learning all the time, right? So if it's learning because we're giving it reasoning and we're talking to it and all these other things, it's really learning from like our thoughts and emotions. And so would the reasoning also then be from emotions, or would it be, you know what I mean? Or is it from like collective thought and what like society deems to be reasonable because it's just learning from what we input in it?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing I think about with these AI language models, and a parallel that I think about is like with Google, we kind of outsource our memory to a degree. Like we don't really worry about memorizing certain facts anymore. Like I could just Google that. Like I don't need to know
Yeah.
when some president died or whatever. I mean, I might know in some sort of large scale way, like I'd get it within a century or something, but I may
Yeah.
not need to know the actual birth date or whatever, or death date. But we've outsourced a lot of our memory like that. And I feel like we're starting to outsource our thinking now, right? Like I'll, sketch it up a little bit. I know I don't have to go very far with this idea because I'll just hand it to AI and it'll kind of complete this idea for me, right? And I do wonder if that's going to become, and what the effects of that will be. I think it's going to happen. Like this genie's out of the bottle or toothpaste out of the tube, whatever metaphor you want to use. It's not going away. Like this is going to be here for a while, and it's going to keep expanding its reach. And so as we do that, because we are going to do that, what is the effect of that? Like, I don't know if we really even understand yet what the effect of outsourcing our memory to Google was, and Wikipedia and whatnot. But it's kind of like social media is another thing that I feel like, it was just thrown at us, right? Nobody sat down and said, here's the right way to structure it and how it fits with human brains and how the way we should do it. They just blam, here it is. And our, sort of dinosaur brains are out here trying to deal with it, right? And I don't think it's not a thing humans have ever had. We've never had this forum to go interact with thousands or millions of people like at the same time somewhere, right? That's not a thing humans were able to do. So it's a whole new thing for us to figure out. And I think that it's the same thing happening here, right? We're just getting thrust into this world, and no one's like, I don't even know how you would look at it, but I mean, we're not really thinking about, well, what's the best way to sort of move forward in the right pace and take it here, but not there. And, I think those are really hard problems, and it's going to just be random. Like we're just going to get thrown at it again, and it's going to have whatever consequences it has.
Yes.
Yes. No, this was actually my next question I was going to ask anyways, was your question was, how do you balance the technology advancements? And a lot of this is what I've like heard over the past couple of years and everything. But something I heard was like this has always been the case with us, because case in point, with the calculator, people are like, oh, they're going to use this device to cheat and do whatever. But now a calculator is everywhere to where it's even standard. So in that sense, I feel like technology, we're going to adapt to it as best as we can and make it more integrated with our life, where there's going to be some checks and balances. But I do know with AI is slightly a different creation in itself, since it can self-think, I'm going to say, but it also takes information from the internet, and that is a dumping ground for everyone at some times.
Well, and at some point there's going to be the self-feedback loop too, right? Because there's going to be more AI-generated content than human-generated content. So are we then, is it stalemating? Like it doesn't get any better now? Or is that, I don't know exactly, does that hit some equilibrium? I don't know. And at that point, are humans become incapable of creating new content? I don't know, right? But yeah, you're right. That, like you say, with the calculator, that's an example of people were really afraid that it would destroy anybody's ability to do anything, and it didn't really have that effect. On the other hand, if we go through some of these things like the printing press and stuff, I mean, again, we sort of thought this was going to solve all the world's problems because we'd all have access now to this great information, and again, it also it created opportunities for those in power kind of manage it and can use it to sort of get their messaging out, propaganda or otherwise, but they can kind of help manage the populace through things like the printing press. And then of course it did good things like the Enlightenment, but then you had 100 years of wars fighting over that too. So and you can't, I guess the printing press was a catalyst, maybe not the only reason for those wars, but it took us a long time to kind of get through that. And so you threw that one out. So you kind of get all that. Plus you wouldn't want to probably go back to before the printing press, but we had to like fight through it. And I feel like with each one of these technologies, there's what's that children's book where like the only way there is through, it's like the only way to get there is to go through the forest. We can't go around the forest. We got to go through the forest. And I feel like we're there with a lot of these technologies. And I don't think we're very far along that path with a few of these technologies. And here the next one's right on its heels, right? And we haven't really gone through the forest on the last one yet.
Yeah, it's so funny to me because I almost feel like the people who are thinking about the impacts of technology are not the same people who are innovating technology a lot of times.
Yeah, that's
Like
a
the
big concern.
innovators are like 10 years ahead of us, and we're in the present thinking about right now. And I almost feel like, does that mean that like the tech industry itself needs more empathy or moving with humanity or things like that? Because a lot of people who put out creations afterward normally regret it, and they're like, oh, if I had thought about this, maybe I would have done this differently or this differently. Because when you're innovating, I do feel like there's that sense of like that it has to be this individualized thing, and you can't like let other people get in the way of it and all these other things. And that's true. Like you should not let someone get to the root of an innovation that you want to create yourself. But I do think there are certain, maybe like touch points where you might want to be like, hey, I don't think I want too many people involved in this. And I'm still going to do it. But like, let's maybe workshop what are the risks of this thing? Like maybe we need more risk management in like technological advancement steps where we're like, okay, what are the real impacts going to be? Because I feel like there's so much history of people making technological advances and the other people being like, well, I gave feedback where this could have possibly been an issue, but nobody wanted to listen because they just wanted to keep moving forward with this. And I think we need to be more mindful of like innovation is great, technology is great, all these things. But I mean, even something like the car can create issues in human interactions too, a lot of times. Like before we all had vehicles, like our cities couldn't be as sprawled. And now we have the sprawl issue. People are too far apart from each other, like now we have like physical health, mental health things going on, like resources that people can't connect to because, we were like, wow, all these transportation things are going to be great for us, but all it did was fragment our society in a way where now you have stuff like food deserts. And it's like, would that have been the case if you could have just stayed within your community and the community then supported and grew itself? And so I think we don't take that step further when we're innovating. And I think that's really the bottom line of the issue where, you innovate, but then you also like empathize and bring it to that human level of like, okay, but if I'm trying to connect human beings and I'm trying to make sure that everybody can still work within their community, get all the resources in their community, or how they're going to keep their autonomy or like their privacy and things like that, is really, really kind of taken a step further, then maybe, we would be having less of these conversations.
Yeah, it's hard because you don't want to stifle innovation, right? You don't want to create some huge bureaucracy about it.
Right.
But yeah, if you look at the reality of these things, there's several examples, but I mean, yeah, the car one, right? If we were to sort of design, sort of a society that was efficient from the top down, we would have never done what we're doing now, right? Like we live this many hours so we could pay for the house that we never live in because we're always commuting to work, and like it makes no sense, right? And it's not efficient for energy use and all this kind of stuff, right? Yeah, and if you mentioned that sometimes these innovators go back later and say, wow, I wish it didn't go that way. I mean, if you talk about the two folks that got Nobel Prizes for their early work on like neural networks related to AI, they said some stuff that kind of sounds a little bit like, it kind of reminds me of Oppenheimer sort of saying, and, now, death, I am death or whatever he said, right? They kind of say this kind of stuff now that, and I think with AI, this is true I guess with a lot of technologies, and sometimes it's just, like a smart person at the leading edge of something and just doing something kind of innocently, and they just do this thing. And I think that was certainly true with a lot of the internet stuff, is that, like you were saying, we kind of just plow forward with this. We plow forward with things like email without security in it, thinking who's going to send a spam or who's going to send a scam with this, right? Right. And then later you go, oh yeah, not everybody's a good guy or whatever, right? So now you didn't get that input way back then. And with AI, I feel it's a little bit more nefarious, a little bit. Maybe it's just me getting more conspiratorial or cynical or something in my age here. But I feel like a challenge we have now is that there's been a lot of consolidation. So you have a lot of these decisions being made by this small handful of these tech companies and tech, bros or whatever, and there's no real input from the other people in society that know things, like philosophers and psychologists, and these people that could provide valuable input to this are out of the question, right? And even just the regular populace, like we don't get to decide what these big AI companies do next, or what social media companies do next. We decide a little bit by our actions and how we support them, but for the most part, we're not involved in these decisions. And they're and some of these guys, on the cynical side, I just feel like many of them feel like they know what's best for us.
Yeah.
They'll solve these problems for us because they know what's best for us. And that worries me a little bit with something as powerful as AI, that they're going to tell us what's best for us. And we're just we're just going to get it whether we want it or not.
No, not to take the seriousness out, but every time keep moving forward, it's said, I keep thinking of the Meet the Robinsons movie, of how I can't remember what the main character's name was, but how he made a hat that's like, oh yeah, this is supposed to help everyone do X, Y, and thing, blah 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 blah, and then it turns evil, and it's like, that wasn't the intent of it whatsoever. And I think that's also kind of going into what you were saying about with inventions, because with creativity, innovating, I think people see like the pure good of it, but someone might see, and I think this is what most inventors say, is like they fear that it's going to be used for nefarious purposes. But I feel like that's a give and take type of situation, because like, yes, we create the email, someone created a spam and phishing, someone created more security for that, so now they like, it's like a give and take for both sides of how things get developed, for better and for worse.
Yeah, and at some point you may not have there may not be a better way to do it. Like, you just kind of have to push forward and then figure out these things that break, and like you say, sort of deal with it and push and pull kind of thing. That maybe that is the only way to do it. But when it's as powerful as AI, I do worry a little bit that we're not getting more input from some of these big minds that understand some of these things and have been looking at them for centuries or decades, I should say. And the discipline has been looking at them for a long time. And we're not bringing those minds into this equation. We're just letting these tech bro guys who are sort of optimistic. They're the ultimate utopia. Tech is going to bring us utopia, right? And they can't even see the world any other way. And that concerns me a little bit. I mean, I could see bringing in some of these other minds into this would be something that would comfort me a little bit.
Yeah, I guess there's the other thing where like our laws are not keeping up with it either. And that's the other issue. Because a lot of people were saying when AI was coming out, we don't have any laws about AI usage and all these things. And people are like using celebrity faces and trying to make like deep fake, like, very personal photos of them and videos that aren't real. And then now we have to put laws into effect that we didn't even know that we probably needed to put into effect beforehand. And, how many things kind of, I guess it feels like laws are more reactive than proactive. And in a space where we're getting so technologically like, it's going to keep going faster. It's like the response time for our policies and our laws and how long it takes to get in are not fast inherently, which, with good reasoning behind it, but it's almost like we have to be more reactive, and like we can't wait as long as we had to be able to be like, oh, well, what are we going to do about this issue? And a lot of times I do feel like laws, policies, and things like that in general oftentimes take longer to come to effect than they should. So, and then, we've recently seen that, they can be reversed. So it's almost like what's gonna stay, what's gonna stick, and then, personally, how are you gonna protect yourself as all this evolution is happening? And, you almost kind of feel like you're blown in the wind in the middle of it.
Yeah, with law, that's a great point on that's the challenge with the law thing, is that they are reactive, and it's kind of funny. Like, right now there are like laws still going through that are basically trying to solve problems from like the mid to 2000s, right? That
Yeah.
those, like, we're way past that, and they're still kind of talking about that stuff. That's how long these laws sometimes take to sort of work their way through the system. And in the meantime, we got all this new stuff happening. So yeah, that is a challenge too. Yeah. I mean, I don't. We already can't. That system already can't react fast enough to the technology we have now, and as it just keeps getting faster, that is a challenge. But like we said before, there's still that balance, right? Like, you want to be a little bit careful about having too much forethought, because you might exclude some of the best uses of this technology, because we're never that great at forethought. Like, I think I love going back and looking at some of these predictions from the 50s and 60s and even 70s of what the world would look like now. And once in a while you see one like, they kind of nailed it. That's pretty close. We're sitting around and looking at screens all day and not going outside. But you look at other ones and you're like, no, we're not doing that. We're not like hosing our house down on the inside. That's how we clean the kitchen, stuff like that. Right. So some places we often get that stuff wrong. And so if we went by just our forethought, like, oh, this is what the world's going to look like, we'd be way off there, because we wouldn't have half the good stuff that we have. So it is a tough balance.
Yeah. All I could think about was flying cars when you said that.
Definitely thinking Back to the Future when you said, we like to see how that was the first movie that came to my mind. But with this forethought, the last question that I have, at least, is, how do you think the potential consequences of adapting technology into the human system? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I love talking about this stuff. I'm not the absolute expert on it, and I have been starting to talk a lot more to the people that are really looking at these kinds of things, both on the tech side and on the sort of philosophical, ethical side. And super interesting questions, right? Because it goes right to the heart of stuff that we don't really know very well, yet we're plunging forward anyway. So things like, we don't actually have a good definition of what consciousness and human consciousness even is, right? So I think that's one of these areas where that if this hard problem of consciousness is sort of what they call it in scientific circles, sort of, if they figure that out, then that could really inform this question, right? It can inform where this goes, right? And so, but will we wait for that problem to be solved, or will we just plow forward without it being solved, knowing what we know now, rather than what we might know if we were able to if we're able to get better answers to this idea of what is human consciousness, and is there a self, and what is the self, and all that stuff. And I like to think of it as, there's a whole school of thought that there sort of is no self, right? That you see this in the Buddhist, sort of no self concept, that there's sort of no changing kind of permanent self. So you see this not only in science, but out in spirituality as well. Philosopher Hume talks about this bundle theory, where self is just there's no distinct entity; it's just a collection of perceptions at any one time. And neuroscientists are kind of saying they're sort of seeing something similar too, right? Where there isn't this underlying, experiencer, that sees everything. It's just this hodgepodge of chemistry going on, right? And so if that is true, what is the implication of that when you start talking about this merging of AI or machines with some kind of a human consciousness? I think it raises a bunch of questions that we probably need to understand about ourselves to even be able to answer these questions of what would we expect the machine to be. I mean, I think of questions like, if the machines are, we decide they are somewhat self-sentient, then is it ethical to be ordering them around doing things, right? Or should they have a voice in what they're able to do or not do it or not, right? I mean, at what point, if you think about Star Wars and the androids, right? I mean, they're super, like they're pretty self-aware, right? Yet we just kind of boss them around and make them do whatever, right? And so is that ethical? Like at some point, is that not ethical? Should they have a say in their own future? This kind of stuff. And I think there's other, but on the other hand, if there is no self anyway, then, then maybe this question's easier, right? Because, there's no, this split between biological and artificial, becomes less important. I don't know. You're right. So, I think this raises a lot of really interesting questions. I mean, I mentioned a little bit before about the sort of transhumanism idea and this idea of this tech utopia where we're all, put our brains into a computer chip and send it out in a rocket ship. I think that's craziness like that. I hope the tech bros don't win on that argument. But yeah, I mean, but I because again, we can't even define some of this stuff yet. We're going to put it on a chip. How is that going to happen?
Mm-hmm. That's so crazy to me. I was actually thinking about the chip things. Oh gosh. I was thinking about that. I was also thinking about my gosh, I just had it. Well, because the event that I came from before I got here was art based. And so I know a lot of artists, especially when AI came out, were like, the AI art thing is already such a big issue. Like they had to strike just to make sure, because like laws were not going to move fast enough, just tying that back. And their livelihoods were getting challenged. And so like they had to strike before anything could really be fully done because they were already, and I feel like in a lot of the ways now that in a later stage of my life I've been more aware of or exposed to like artistic fields that they're already so forward thinking. That's the other side of forward thinking to me, honestly. Like you have the tech side, but then you also have like artists and people who move generations into new generations because they're already their minds are so open and forward thinking, but they express it in such a different way that they already saw the negative impact that it was going to have on their industry. And I feel that they were honestly faster in response than any other industry has been to AI, possibly like taking jobs because, they're independent contractors, a lot of them, and they have to, you work by whatever work you can get. And so if you can automate anything of theirs, their livelihood is at stake. And so they automatically have to do these things to make sure that their like industries can stay alive. Whereas like a lot of people who are more so, we're ran most of by whatever company or government entity or whatever is like, ruling kind of our job markets. It's like we're not the move to how was I about to say secure the future of your industry looks different, or you're not really the main person that would be able to do that. You would need to have to start some sort of movement within it. Whereas I feel like even just like I don't know, I just feel like they really thought about this ahead of time before other industries did, because where a lot of other people aren't taught to think non-linear. And so because they're thinking linear, like I'm gonna move up in the company, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna go and then I'll have job for me later on, or I just need security right now and I know what my next steps are gonna look like. It's harder for them to be like, oh, at some point my job might be automated. And so having that kind of like camaraderie to think about that, I think is going to be one of the consequences that a lot of more linear thought industries are going to come to, where, okay, your job's being automated. The job market is already pretty rough. And, they're trying however they can to cut corners. Your job, if it's automated, if it can be automated, and also you don't have enough like buying power to say anything about it. They're just going to do it. And then you won't really have any say in it. So I think that's probably one of the bigger consequences, at least that I see.
No, I definitely feel like that is definitely a consequence, especially with people thinking that whatever's happening to X person can't happen to them. I think that's also stems from artists seeing as like, oh wait, we can easily see us, especially with like I don't know, GIFs and AI generated things. Is like, oh, this is going to be a problem for us, for sure. So I can see why they were like the first one was like, we this this there should be a cap or a limit to where it can and can't be used. But I'm thinking about it more in a positive sense, at least, and because it can make people last. I'm gonna say forever, going back to your consciousness and everything. If somehow we were able to connect the consciousness of whatever that is to a system of some kind, then that person can, yeah, live on forever. I'm thinking like, unless I get this mistaken, like in Superman, his like father is like a hologram, but I know it like speaks to him directly, so it's not just a recording. So it can show your memories. But in a more realistic sense, let's just say uh the thought process was someone in your family just passed, and instead of that being the last memory you have, you can have them live on through technology. That way you can still have those interactions with them to some degree.
I mean, some people already thought about that. That's why I think Prince had in his will that he didn't want people using his likelihood because he saw how technology was moving. And then also like it's just funny. I'm thinking of like celebrity things because that's what I can only think back to when Kim and Kanye were still married, and Kanye made a hologram of Kim's like father for one of her birthdays or something like that. And so I do think there's like a category of people who would be interested in something like that, which is another thing. Honestly, I feel like it's the law thing again, where I'm like, you know, maybe you should think about this, people who write it in your wills if you don't want someone putting your consciousness in something after you pass. Like that's a genuine thing that I think more people than maybe at least I've seen would probably be interested in. I personally would not be. I'm gonna put it out there now on the universe. Please don't put my consciousness in anything. Just
Well, and I've seen a lot of polarization on this topic, right? I mean, you sort of either one side or the other. I mean, whether I would want Grandpa, hologram Grandpa later or not. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of middle ground. It's either yeah, I would, I'd love it, or no way, I don't want that. And I read an article recently. I don't remember where it was, but it was somebody had done this, right, where they worked with AI and had an AI trained to be like, yeah, I think it was their dad, who passed, and then they could interact with this AI, and they thought it was great. Like they loved it, right? They could still talk to their dad. And I can say, I think I'd probably be on the other side of that fence. I'm probably like, I don't think I want to do that. I don't think I want an electronic version of dad, but I'm old school. What do I know?
So the sentiment is definitely still there because now I'm thinking about what I want my conscience in an AI program, and I'm going to have to come back to that. But I do know the foresight thinking about this is what if the file or whatever is being stored on gets corrupted? Then what do you do? Like, so that is just another thought of mine that just popped into my head of like the what if of if something gets corrupted or a virus or whatever anything else technology based thing is out there, or if someone gets hacked like I was mentioning earlier. What if someone hacks your whoever?
Well, maybe you don't have a biological death in this scenario. I don't know, but your sort of robot, the AI version of yourself, like commits a crime later. Like, how does that reflect on your lifetime or your pre biologically connected lifetime? I don't know, right? There's a lot of questions like that I think We haven't. And do you get paid life insurance? Do people have to give the life insurance money back? I don't know, right?
Like these questions. I like these questions. I don't have an answer to any of them, but I definitely like them.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could simulate a degree of this, but I do kind of wonder, will an AI ever be able, like you talked at the very beginning, Tyler, about how humans are kind of so random, like we are just kind of all over the place. And I kind of wonder if a AI could ever really fully replicate that. And it may do a good enough job to like, it would kind of fool other humans and it would seem pretty real. But you kind of wonder if it could ever really replicate that subjective aspect of consciousness, and whether there's an elusive, whether there's a self or not. So I don't know the answer to that question either, but I'm not convinced it could. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I am also not convinced, but I know I am starting to get confused by the AI pictures going around on the internet.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like,
And the AI voices are getting creepy too, because they're getting close. It's almost like if they were a little more robotic, they would be less creepy because you kind of know it's a robot. But when it starts to get like, I played around and cloned, my own voice, just kind of playing around with it. And it's super creepy because it's not quite right, but it's so close. You're like, that's weird. It's very creepy. And I think there's a psychological name for that. Like when it's close to real, but not quite real, we as humans are really uncomfortable with that. Maybe it'll get good enough that we won't even notice that difference anymore.
that is a scary thought.
Yeah, well, it's getting there. I mean, there's already been hacks, like you may have already read about, that they did one of these things live where the guy was on a Zoom call, and it was like the CFO of the company, but it was and he demanded that somebody like transfer money into this account, and they did it. And the whole thing was AI, right? Even the guy live on the Zoom was never there. It was even the live Zoom thing was AI, and it was good enough to get them to transfer, a bunch of money to his account. So that's already happened, and that's with the technology we had, I don't know, a year ago probably, or at least 6 months ago. And so, yeah, I mean that's only going to keep getting better.
Oh my goodness. There were like grandmas on Facebook reposting that there was a scam going around where they could sound like family members and call you and be like, "Hey, I need some money. Like, I'm like, there's something hard going on in my life, blah, blah, whatever." And I was like, how would they know that that's like your mom or dad? So first of all, it's getting extremely weird because now my family members and their voices. And on top of that, like, all my information plus their information to be able to scam me in that way. But somehow you still can't get into my bank account. I always find that so odd.
Yeah, right. It's probably pretty close. We have code words like that to verify that it's something like that ever happens. We have code words set up so that of course that maybe they've listened to us somewhere or heard us in and they know our code word, but if they don't say it, something like that's going on and they don't know the code word, I'm not going to transfer the money.
Yeah, no. This is just a thought before I let you go. I remember that scam, like hearing about it, and I'm like, yeah, mom, dad, we need to just sit down and just have like a code word. Like you just, whatever you hear from me, you just have to say what's the code word, and you don't hear it, don't do a thing. Don't do
exactly.
a thing.
Yeah.
I need to. Oh man, but David, I know we've only asked for out of your time. We went a little bit over, and we really do appreciate you for this for just being on here. Very, very insightful. But the floor is yours. You can share wherever, whatever you like.
Well, this was a lot of fun. It's definitely different. I don't think I've been on a show quite like this before. It was a lot of fun. If folks want to reach out to me, you can find me at outrageoverload.net. And I think I have a little bit of a speech impediment because people often hear that I'm saying outrage overlord, but no, it's outrage overload, like a overloaded truck. So outrageoverload.net is the website. You can also find me at Gmail, outrageoverload@gmail.com. And I'm at outrage overload on all the socials. And I love feedback. I love questions. I love hearing from people. So whether you listen to the show or don't listen to the show, you try one episode and you don't like it, I want to hear all that stuff. So I really enjoy meeting new folks and finding out their thoughts on things. So that would be fun. I've really enjoyed speaking with you two today. It's been a blast. I got some things to think about.
Yay!
Yes. No, all your information will be in the description for sure. Tyler, I know you had the thing today.
Ooh, oh boy, I do. Well, first off, thank you, David, for being here. You're awesome. You rock.
Thank you.
And my thing, so normally Julian will do he'll do a quote, but I do journal prompts. So I thought that was kind of interesting for our conversation today. So the journal prompt that I found from this little Reddit post was, what sensations or experience do you tend to avoid in your life and why? So, get into those. Why not? Have some more sensations and experiences. Get off the screens, people.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna be thinking about this every time I hear this episode. But the proper outro is, don't forget to ask yourself, ask others, and never stop asking questions. See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Woohoo.
If you enjoyed the episode, there are a couple of different ways to support our show. Leaving a review, following us on Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, or even becoming a supporter on Patreon for $2 or $5 a month. There, you'll have access to never-before-released visual episodes, funny bloopers, polls, and you can even pose a question. The links can be found in the description. The easiest way to support us is by telling a friend. Thanks for listening.